What if the very thing that broke you open as a child is the same thing that made you capable of feeling the world more deeply than anyone around you? Carl Jung spent decades studying the origins of psychological sensitivity, and what he discovered about the connection between early trauma and emotional depth will completely change how you understand yourself and the empaths in your life. Because here's what most people get completely wrong. Empathy isn't a personality trait you're born with. According to Jung, it's forged in pain, in confusion, in the specific, particular wounds of childhood. Stay with me, because what comes next will rewrite everything you thought you knew about why you feel so much. Jung observed that children are born in a state he called psychological merger. They cannot yet distinguish where they end and others begin. This is normal, expected. But in healthy environments, the child gradually develops what Jung called the ego boundary, a stable sense of self that separates their inner world from the emotional chaos of others. But what happens when that environment isn't safe? What happens when a child grows up in a home where emotions are unpredictable, where love comes with conditions, where the atmosphere can shift without warning? That child never fully develops that boundary. And here's what Jung understood that most people miss entirely. That absence of boundary isn't a defect. It becomes a survival system. The child who cannot predict when a parent will explode, withdraw, or collapse learns to read the room at a level most adults never develop. They scan for micro-expressions. They detect shifts in tone before a single word is spoken. They become, in Jung's terms, extraordinarily attuned to the unconscious signals of others. This is the origin of the empath, not a gift handed down from the universe, a skill born from necessity, a form of hypervigilance that kept them safe when safety wasn't guaranteed. Jung called this the development of the auxiliary function under pressure. When a child is forced to rely on emotional perception as their primary tool for navigating the world, that function becomes almost supernatural in its precision. But here's where it gets deeply complicated, and this is the part that will stop you cold. The same sensitivity that protected them as a child becomes a burden they carry into adulthood, because they never learn to turn it off. They walk into a room and feel everything. The tension between two people who haven't spoken yet, the sadness someone is hiding behind laughter, the anger underneath a smile. They absorb it all, automatically, involuntarily, exhaustingly. Jung described this as the collapse of the psychic membrane, the wall that most people have between their inner world and the emotional weather of others simply never fully formed. And the adult empath spends years believing this makes them weak, oversensitive, too much. What they don't realize is that they are operating with a perceptual capacity most people never develop at all. But here's the shadow side Jung identified, and this is what makes the childhood wound so complex. Because the same child who learned to feel everything also learned something else. They learned that their own needs were secondary. In homes where a parent's emotional state dominated the atmosphere, the child's role was to manage, to soothe, to disappear when necessary. Jung called this the formation of the false self, a persona constructed entirely around what others need, what keeps the peace, what prevents the storm. The empath grows up masterful at caring for everyone except themselves. They give without asking. They absorb without releasing. They forgive before they've even finished being hurt. And they do it not from weakness, but from the deep early programming that told them survival meant selflessness. What Jung discovered next is where the transformation begins, and it's absolutely crucial. He called it the return of the repressed self. Because everything the empath buried in childhood, their anger, their needs, their right to take up space, doesn't disappear. It accumulates, it waits. It builds pressure beneath the surface until something in adulthood finally cracks the persona open. It might be a relationship that mirrors the original wound too precisely, a betrayal that feels ancient, like it happened before, a moment of such profound exhaustion that the false self simply cannot hold any longer. Jung understood that this breaking point isn't a breakdown. It's a breakthrough dressed in the language of collapse. And what emerges from that breaking open is something the empath has never had access to before. Their own authentic self, unfiltered, uncompromised, unapologetic. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming fully, completely, irreversibly yourself. For most people, this process unfolds slowly across an entire lifetime, if it happens at all. But for the empath who has carried the weight of everyone else's emotional world since childhood, the process, when it finally begins, is seismic. They stop explaining themselves to people who were never listening. They stop softening truths to protect those who use that softness against them. They stop abandoning their own inner world to maintain their presence in everyone else's. And they begin the slow, revolutionary act of turning that extraordinary perceptual sensitivity inward. Because here is what Jung identified as the ultimate paradox of the empath's journey. The same capacity that made them so attuned to others, so able to feel what's unspoken, to sense what's hidden, to understand what others cannot even articulate about themselves. That exact same capacity, turned inward, becomes the most powerful tool for self-knowledge that exists. The empath who has always read others with perfect clarity begins finally to read themselves. They start to recognize their own patterns, their own wounds, the specific geometry of the pain they carry and where it originally came from. Jung called this shadow integration, the moment when you stop projecting your unlived life outward and begin claiming it as your own. And this is where the childhood trauma reveals its final secret. The wound was never random. Jung believed that the psyche moves toward wholeness with an intelligence we don't consciously control. The sensitivity that trauma produced, the depth it carved into you, the capacity for feeling it forced you to develop, none of it was meaningless. It was preparation. The empath who has walked through the specific fire of emotional childhood chaos becomes something rare in adulthood. Someone who can hold complexity without collapsing, who can sit with another person's pain without flinching, who can see through the surface of things to what's actually moving underneath, not because they chose to be this way, but because they were forged this way. Jung said that the most profound gifts are always hidden inside the deepest wounds, not as a consolation, not as a way of making suffering poetic, but as a psychological truth he observed again and again across a lifetime of work. The child who had to feel everything to survive becomes the adult who can feel everything and use it. The sensitivity was never the problem. It was always the beginning of the power.